So you got a new gun. That's pretty cool. You also got a new optic. All right, you attach said optic. Hey, you're ready to rock and roll now. You are set. Oh, wait, you gotta zero your optic. You gotta zero it. Let's talk about different holds. Welcome back, everybody. Clint here today with Classic Firearms, and I know, yeah, it was a drill weekend, okay? But anyway, we're here not to talk about that, but we're here to talk about these guys and zeroing your optics, red dots, more so, because a lot of people, I mean, this is a discussion that's had all over the internet, all about, hey, I just got a new red dot, new holographic, new whatever it might be, prism, give you whatever you want. But what do you guys zero your optics at? Some people love that 36-yard zero, that will then equate to a 100-yard zero, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. Some people just like the simple 25-yard because that's what my indoor range is, or just the basic 100-yard because that's what everybody does. But what truly is a good zero for you? And again, something about this, we can just go ahead and hop right into it, actually. Train, practice. Because what you're gonna find out is you're gonna have your gun zeroed for whatever approximation, whatever it might be, right? Depends on the purpose for that rifle. For instance, let's take the M4 here, the M4 V7. This right here probably wouldn't be my home defense gun, right? For me at least. Some people, absolutely, and more power to you, that's gonna be just fine. But a 16-inch 5.56, yeah, you might see a little bit too much penetration depending on the rounds you use, so it might not be ideal for that. But something like a coyote gun, bore gun, something like that, maybe. Overall, just a defensive carbine, sure. So what would a good zero for that be? And it makes sense why a lot of people go to 100 yards. 100 yards is one of the most common distances that people can kind of pick up on, and that's because of, well, football. It's very easy to gauge a distance out to 100 yards because you can approximately guess about 100 yards due to a football field. It's about as long as a football field. Easy enough, right? So within 100 yards, I know I can take a red dot and be pretty accurate with it. I'll at least be on target. You might be a few inches off from your point of aim simply because of how optics work. Your optic and your barrel are not exactly completely parallel, right? To an extent. I want to say you can have a zero, like if you were to throw a laser on your gun, you get what's kind of like a parallel zero, so that way you don't have a crossover. And let me explain what I'm trying to talk about here. For red dots and optics, what's happening is your reticle might be set on the target, way out in the distance. What's happening is once that projectile leaves the muzzle, it's coming up to meet where your point of aim is. So if your zero is off, or your distance isn't set, or I guess I should say your reticle isn't set for the distance you're shooting at, you could run into an issue where you're either shooting too low because the target isn't far away enough, or too high because your target's maybe a little bit further out than what you're zeroed for.
I know for a fact. I shot that thing.
Granted, eventually that bullet will fall, and now it's crossing back over to that point of aim and point of impact partnership. Sounds very complicated. That's because, well, it's a little bit difficult to explain. But look at it this way. When I went through boot camp with the Marines, we were using iron sights, and we would sight in and get a 36-yard zero. The reason they went for 36 yards is because your point of aim and your point of impact will be similar at 100 yards, if not the same. Whenever you look at magnified optics, they're a little bit easier, if you ask me. Because if you've got something like the Leupold that I have on the Mark 12 here, it's got bullet drop compensation on it. So when I'm looking down my reticle here, if I zero it to 100 yards, I know that right where the center of my crosshairs meet, about right, you know, here, that would be a 100 point of aim, point of impact. If I look here, I then have mil dots below that are references to 200 yards, 300, 400, 500 yards, and then a horizontal stadia for 600 yards. At 100 yards, as long as I'm making good, precise hits, then I know I'm set for that. But keep in mind, for your magnified optics, you got to keep in mind what type of loads you're shooting. For Leupold, they have their custom shop, which is pretty cool, and you can get custom turrets. This is the Mark AR, a discontinued optic now, but a great optic. I like it a lot. It originally came with 55 grain for 223 adjustment turrets. You can get those customized out to whatever type of ammunition you're shooting. Typically, I like to run 77 grain open tip match through this. So the deviation from 77 grain to 55 grain is going to be quite significant, as we recently showed you guys in a video all about velocities. 55 grain is significantly quicker, as you can imagine. But anyway, so making your adjustments are going to differ just a little bit. But this guy here, I know if I'm zeroed at 100 yards and I move this up and I'm looking at a 300-yard target and I have that third dot, or I say technically second dot on my target, I will be making impact at 300 yards, even out to 500 yards, which is super easy to do with this gun. So easy. But what about the red dot back here? That's where it gets a little bit more complicated because there is no bullet drop compensation. It's pretty much point of aim, point of impact, or so you think. What you need to keep in mind is if you're focusing a red dot, what are your purposes? If I'm using my 300 Blackout here as my home defense gun, this guy, I would feel comfortable at saying 10, 15 yards. Home defense, easy enough. My point of aim is going to be my point of act precisely within 15 yards, or at 15 yards, I should say. If your target is closer than that, you have to think height over bore in relation to where your optic is mounted to the bore. You've got at least 2 inches there, depending on the height of your sight, of course. But about 2 inches from where the barrel is sitting to where your point of aim is with the reticle. So aim a little bit higher and you'll be there. Granted, at such short distances, if you're not trying to bypass body armor, your shots are probably going to be hits and you'll be fine. But a few inches is a big deal. But anyway, with that being said, where do you guys like to hold your red dot sights? For me on this guy, I know I'm good out to 100 yards quickly on here, and several other hundreds of yards on my magnified optic. For my red dot though, I like to keep it right around 50 yards. 50 yards is easy enough. If I have this guy zoomed all the way out where 4 power is here, it's still very easy for me to quickly get sight on target, and 100 yards will be very easy to pick up. But if I need to switch over to my red dot to engage something a little bit quicker, or a little bit closer, I mean, then it's easy enough to do that. 50 yards is typically where it's at for me. And also too, it's kind of typically where I use it mostly for work. If I'm transitioning between a red dot and a red dot and magnified, it's typically because I'm going from close to further out, and the range we typically shoot at is 50 to 100 yards. That's where the targets are set up at least. Of course, we can set up stuff in between there, but that's ultimately where it is. It's again comes down to what your use is. If you just want a good overall hold, then a lot of people do recommend the 100 yards. Personally, I like the idea of the 50-yard hold because, again, if you have that zero at 50 yards, you also have a similar zero to 250 yards, which expands your accuracy at a greater distance over a 36 and 100. That's just me personally. And I just know if I'm engaging a target closer than that, to aim slightly higher. It works for me, and that's just something that I do personally. You guys might have better recommendations down below in the comment section, and please, by all means, comment away, as we know you guys like to do that. If you haven't seen our latest Outside the Warehouse video, Katie, Alec, and myself, we all read the some of y'all's mean comments, and they're pretty funny. But what I think is the best, though, is out of all the mean comments, there's at least a dozen to go with, a dozen positive comments. You guys are awesome, and it's great to hear from you guys down in the comment section. A lot of you guys enjoy all of our SHOT Show coverage too, and a lot of you guys are new to the channel from all of our SHOT Show coverage, and we greatly appreciate all of you. So thank you guys for tuning in.